camp right out of high school in August 1982. At that time, there was only like 5% of the military that was female. Okay. Now, when Laurie, I asked Laurie to write me a bio, and you could tell she's from the era where you wrote letters home. It wasn't emails, because she wrote me a book. So I'm going to paraphrase what she wrote me. And she was stationed at a number of naval bases from Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, California, London, England. She was all over. Of course, that's typical military. You know, they're kind of like the dandelions. You know, you blow it and you don't know where you're going to land. The little seeds. And that's the way military is. And we appreciate what you guys do. Guys and gals. Here I am. I'm saying guys, and I shouldn't say that. She returned back to the States. She joined in 1982, and she returned back to the States in 2000, where she then joined the Naval Reserves. Okay. She was mobilized several times as the operations support officer controlling the reserves that was based from all over for Iraq, for the Iraq War. With her skills, you know, she became quickly the chief coordinator in 2011 for all of Europe, Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia, and she just kept, you know, giving more and more and more. She's performed, since she's been back, over 1,500 military funerals. I know for a fact that some of you in here have probably been touched for that. Terry, his wife, was Navy, and when she passed, the senior chief was the one to give the flag to Terry. Now, I haven't known a senior chief a long time, but I can tell you this, it's like I've known her forever. She's a person that just can't do enough for the veterans. She retired in March 1st of 2019. At that time, when she went in, there was about 5% females in the military. Right now, we're about 22%. So it's grown tremendously, but it's because of people like her that plowed the ground for the rest of the young women. My daughter is one of those, and it's because of these women who stepped up early on in life and made it happen. Laurie, between her mobilizations, spent 14 years working at the VA hospital. So you know that it's in her heart when it comes to the veterans. She's got 5 children, and I always get tickled with this. Got 5 children and 4 beautiful grandchildren. I guess her kids aren't very beautiful. But that's a typical thing for a grandmother to do. My wife does the same thing. Her husband, Steve, was also Navy. 2 years ago, he was killed by a drunk driver. This happened up in Kansas City, is that correct? At a Kansas City game. So our hearts go out to her for that. She owns and operates, and I know I'm going to screw this up because she told me how to say it. Burrito? Bascio, which means kiss in Italian.
Bascio for you.
Bascio for you, and it's 100% non-profit store that she owns and operates, and all her proceeds either goes to the Honor Flight or to other veterans organizations. Please join me in welcoming Senior Chief Laurie Hickle.
In the Navy, we say hoorah. 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 So, he told me I wrote him a book, and now I'm worried about my speech because he said 15 minutes. And I could say, well, thank you for having me and have a good evening. But anyway, I wanted to thank Post 4 for having me here. And I call the team up here the Triple J. You got Joe, Gene, and John, the Triple J. So anyway, all right. So ornery, bullheaded, and stubborn. They are three very common words I heard about who I was as a teenager. I decided to join the Navy at the beginning of my senior year, and my father was very much against it. He told me that only the bad women joined the service. My recruiter spent over 2 hours convincing him that the Navy was a good choice. And back then, the waiting time for women to get a good job in the Navy, you waited up to 18 months to come in. So I had to join as soon as possible in order to be able to leave right out of high school. August 10th, 1982, I flew to Orlando, Florida, and at that time that was the only place for Navy women to go to boot camp. And I think I saw my recruiter up there, my boot camp person up there on the video. I spent 10 weeks there for boot camp. I worked hard in boot camp and was one of 5 sailors from our group of 82 that was promoted. I don't know if some of you have heard join the Navy, it's an adventure. Well, that's exactly how I saw my 34-year career. I was constantly eager to get to the next step of my adventure, finishing my aviation storekeeper school in Mississippi within a few weeks, and I chose Naval Air Station Sigonella, Sicily as my first duty station. One thing that always stuck in the back of my mind was to prove my father wrong, and that men and women are equal in doing the job. I did not see myself as a woman in the Navy, but as a sailor. We equally shared job responsibilities, and we worked together as a team. We also did not recognize the color of one another's skin. With all the race problems going on in our country today, the military did it right. No matter the race or gender, we all were a component of a working engine, and without each other, we could not run. During my 34 years, I was stationed in Sicily during the Lebanon War from 82 to 85. My command in London, England, stood up the Joint Task Force Noble Anvil, and I was sent to Naples, Italy during the Kosovo crisis. I was stationed in Bahrain during the Iraq War, and then was sent to Qatar in support of the Syria crisis. This qualified me 4 times to be a VFW member, but when I joined the VFW, I noticed I was the only female in the group of veterans. Praise the Lord, I was born during a time when women were still fighting for equal rights. I definitely would probably be a Lucy Stone or a Hedy Lamarr. I don't know if some of you know who that is, but I can't say that I saved the world while being in the Navy, but I'm grateful for women who opened up the opportunities so those of us could serve later in years. Imagine the bravery that it took for the first woman to join the military. Does anyone know the first Marine female that joined the Marines? Opa Mae Johnson. She was 39 years old when she joined, August 13th, 1918. She joined before any women were even allowed to vote. Secretary Daniels opened up the Marine Reserves for women for clerical roles, so battle-ready male Marines could be sent overseas. By luck of the draw, Johnson was the first woman of 300 to be picked to become the first female Marine. First Navy was Loretta Walsh. In the spring of 1917, the United States was preparing for war. However, men were not enlisting in sufficient numbers. March 19, 1917, Secretary Daniels determined that women could enroll in the Navy Reserve Force and issued the order authorizing their enlistment. A few days later, permission was granted, and the first female, Loretta Walsh, was inducted into the Navy. Coast Guards there was kind of a toss-up between the twins, Genevieve and Lucille Baker or Myrtle Hazard. While women served in the Coast Guard as far back as the 1830s as civilian lighthouse keepers, it wasn't until World War I that they could wear the uniform in the service. There's some debate between historians whether it was the 19-year-old twins or Myrtle Hazard, but Myrtle Hazard was the first person to take the oath of enlistment and swear in. The Air Force was Esther McGowan Blake. Her motivation to join the military was deeply personal. Her son was an Air Force pilot and was shot down in Europe, and her younger son was also in the military. She joined the military when it was a newly found branch authorized in July 8, 1948. She continued to serve until 1954, at which her commitment to her country continued in the form of service at the Veterans Regional Quarters, Montgomery, Alabama, until her death of 1982. I noticed on the video they talked about women, but there was a woman that did join the Army, and joined the Army portraying herself as a Robert Shirtlift. And she was the first, historians say, female to join the Army. She was injured multiple times by a saber wound, a gunshot to the thigh, but she always avoided medical attention in fear of being found out. Finally, she was found out, and General Washington authorized her honorable discharge in 1784. During World War II, approximately 350,000 women served in the armed forces. As many as 543 died in war-related incidences, including 16 nurses who were killed from enemy fire. U.S. political and military leaders had decided they did not want women in combat because of a fear of the public opinion. However, in 1948, the Women's Armed Services Integration Act was founded, and it took a long time for Congress to really decide what they wanted women to do in the service. Congresswoman Margaret Chase Smith, she was in the House and at the Senate, and in January 1948, she is the person that actually pushed to have women in the military. And it took her 5 months with the help of General Eisenhower at the time to get this bill passed. The Navy swore in its first 6 women enlistees in July 7, 1948, and later that year commissioned as a lieutenant commander Frances Willoughby, who had served in World War II as a Navy Reserve doctor, was the first female officer. Hundreds began basic training in the Army before the end of the war. Marine Corps launched the program by inducting some of its women from the reserves into the active duty. Does any Marine man know here what they call the female Marines? The marionettes. Marionettes, yes. I had my first discrimination experience while I was stationed in my second duty station, Beeville, Texas. It was a training squadron for Navy pilots. We worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. And it was here that I had my first child. I had a maintenance officer that did not believe that women should be in the Navy or any other branch of service while being a mother. They only gave mothers 4 weeks off after having a baby before we had to return to work. On many occasions, this officer would openly complain about having 3 women in his shop with babies. He decided to put us all on the night shift. We worked 7 at night to 7 in the morning. And there wasn't anything we could do about it. Speaking up or complaining only made matters worse. This officer had served for 15 years already, and he served during a time that women got kicked out for being pregnant in the military. October 1949, the Army established a regulation that mothers with dependent children were ineligible to serve in the military, and any female servicewoman with children under the age of 18 were to be discharged. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Cheryl Hines enlisted in the United States Air Force February 1968 at the age of 20. She dropped out of college and followed in her father's footsteps by joining the Air Force. She said when she joined the Air Force, it had many, many challenges being a woman. During basic training, they were made to wear lipstick and perfume. That I don't remember, but I guess during the early 70s they did. Nonetheless, she graduated basic military training and headed off to her first duty station in Germany, where she met her husband. They were overjoyed when she discovered that she was pregnant. Even though she was excited to have her first baby, she knew her career was in jeopardy because women were not allowed to stay in the military if they were pregnant. Her commander knew that it would be difficult for her to go from 2 incomes down to 1, so he wasn't pushing for her to submit her paperwork to be discharged. She went to visit her doctor for one of her appointments, and the doctor told her, why don't you submit a waiver to stay in the military? And so she did. February 1971, the paperwork came back, and she could stay in the service. She was officially the first female to be able to stay in the military on active duty status and having a child. Of course, there were many, many problems they experienced because she was the first one. Her husband, right after they had the baby, her husband was transferred to another duty station, and the child was not on his orders. Back then, only the men could have dependents on their orders. Women were forced to stay in the barracks. They were not allowed to have dependents. So she was actually the first woman to have a dependent on her orders in 1972. After serving 10 years, she earned her bachelor's degree and eventually went on to be commissioned as an officer. She served 31 years in the Air Force, allowing her to see the first steps of women's evolving rights in the military. She stated that she never would have been able to stay in if she hadn't learned how to speak up. It is thanks to women service members like Heinz Smith who paved the way for women serving today. Too many people in the civilian population don't think of women when they hear the words veteran, war, or combat, which leads to many women not considering themselves as veterans, although they served. As a result, the contribution of women who have served goes unrecognized and unrecorded, making the women who served end up feeling as if their time in the military didn't really matter. When I retired from the Navy, I joined an American Legion with my spouse. I would attend the meetings with numerous men, and I was usually the only female veteran. A few times I spoke up, but I was shot down with unkind remarks and told my husband I was no longer going to attend the meetings. I was asked to join the auxiliary. I highly respect the auxiliary and what those women do, but I am a veteran, and I do not believe there is any difference between a male or a female other than our biological parts. We're all veterans, we all served. Later on, I noticed Wichita had a large female veteran group meeting separately on occasion. I could not figure out why these women did not join the American Legion and get involved with the men. After speaking with several women, I realized times were different when they served. Yes, these women were in the military, but they were not seen or heard from the male counterparts' perspective. After my experience with the first few American Legion meetings, I understood why they didn't join, or maybe they had and experienced the same situation, then left. Not all women are bullheaded and stubborn and ornery. They prefer to stay silent in order to avoid conflict. Even in 2023, we still have men veterans that do not consider these females veterans. We still have civilians that will thank a man for his service, but ignore the female wearing a veteran shirt. I don't think anyone is intentionally being rude, it's just not the norm the way people think and see. Even KSN Veteran Salute has had 75 men to 5 women that they have interviewed. This is why we must change the way the older generation sees veterans. We need the younger generation to keep the American Legions going, and many more women serve now than ever before. Again, I see no difference between men and women veterans because that is how I served in the military. But it was much different 50 or more years ago. They say that change is the most difficult thing for a person to do when they get older, and I completely resemble that remark. However, VFWs and American Legions are dying because the younger generation, my generation, is opting not to join. We must change the way we see women veterans and encourage them to join the American Legions in the VFW. I thank you very much for your time, and I hope you all have a blessed weekend.
Well, that's pretty powerful. Thank you for sharing your time. Your career, obviously you've seen a lot, done a lot, and you do thank you. I know that I've never served, so I can't associate what you've done. But I have a daughter who served, and I've heard her say a lot of the same comments you made. Especially when it goes to the VA. She called the VA, and then the first thing out of her mouth is, I want to talk to your veteran. I want to talk to the veteran. She said, I am the veteran. Okay? and it makes it difficult. So, we all have to learn. Now, in this room, we have female veterans. Would you all please stand? Please stand. Thank you for working out and thank you for your service. As you've seen, there was 4 of you that stood up, 4 or 5, 4, what did you do? Yeah, 4, 5 here, out of the 100 in here. Okay, that just kind of falls right in what we talked about, the percent of female veterans. We have to change the way we think, all of us, including myself. I mean, I'm a father of a female veteran, and I have a tendency saying he or they, it should be they all the time, because they're a vital portion, every one of them, whether you're male or female, it don't matter. You signed on the dotted line when you joined. This is up to and including my life. And we appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Michael,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a special spot for the female veterans because my unit is the one and only unit in Kansas that is a post of all female veterans. They started their post in 1946, and it's the Betty Lou Vilmer Post 394. The very first all-female post started in Washington, D.C. in, I believe, 1942.
That's
So,
fine.
I have a very special place for the female veterans. Our veterans are fantastic, and their stories are unbelievable.
And that post is in Pittsburgh.
Yes, it's a post within Post 64.
Correct.
Yes, but amazing veterans, amazing.
Thank you. Commander Hicks, you have any closing comments you would like to make?
I'm not a big, long talker, but I did want to thank everybody for coming out today. I really appreciate it. It's a milestone for me to make it, made it this far. And you all show me how much you care, so I really thank you.
Well, that concludes our ceremony today. I want to thank you all for joining us and welcome your 5th District officers.
Thank you, thank you, thank
It was an honor for you to be here today, and it pretty much finishes everything up. Could I have Richard Johnson lead us in a closing prayer?